Speaker.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How's everyone doing?
Well, I'm in the midst of potty training twins, so it kind of sucks.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
How's that going?
It's a little rough around the edges.
Are they excited about it or are they resistant?
Well, we tried at the beginning of quarantine just because that seemed like the best time, and one of them wasn't ready, and so it didn't work. And now I feel like they're both ready. They're excited about it, but it's just like way more paying attention than I'm used to being that half-assed mom, you know, and now it's like I have to like be watching them every second that they're not gonna like pee or shit somewhere.
Yeah. I can only relate from a dog parent perspective. Kind of a different scenario, but I've been there through some potty trainings with family and friends with
I don't
kids.
know how long
and
it's supposed to last. Like,
yeah, I mean, some of them like they're like decide and then that's it. And then others it like takes some time to be like, hey, remember when you think you're gonna pee on the floor? That's the time to go to the bathroom. I'm just thinking this is like recorded, and if anybody jumps in, they're gonna be like, what are you talking about?
I think that sometimes too, I'm just like, maybe I shouldn't be talking about this.
It is a part of life. And yeah, for a while I worked in early childhood, and so I had camped for a couple of years with 3-year-olds and a few 4-year-olds, and not everybody was potty trained yet. And so that was an adventure, especially with swimming.
I
In a pool.
I can't imagine. This weekend it's definitely gonna be rough. I already know it.
Well, I mean, at least you're home for the most part, right? Like you don't
Right, like
to...
that's what happened was like the JSG office closed, and so I was like, and we stopped doing open houses, so I was like, all right, Sarah, like this might be our opportunity to try potty training these twins again. So we both could be there, so it was good. For that point.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. It's an adventure, but man, when they got it, it's great.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to that.
Awesome. Anybody else have potty training this week?
Just me, really?
I mean, everybody does their summer a little differently, so.
Yep.
Yeah. Who else do we have here?
Fun.
Yeah. That'll be great. They'll pick up on it quickly.
Yeah, I hope so.
Maybe if one does, the other one will be like, oh, okay.
Right, totally. Yeah. I'm just kind of sick of them like running around naked all over the place too. Like, I mean, Tracy can actually attest to this. I texted her a picture yesterday and like I had to recrop it because my son's penis was in it. Like,
oh geez.
I don't even think it's like so like normal now for me.
Well, it's weird because he's 21, so now it's just awkward.
Good one.
Oh my God, I love it. How's everybody else doing? What do we have here? Jessica, hi. Jennifer, Heidi, Jackie. Not Xavier. Anna, Teresa. Cool. Well, I think we'll get started because we have a good amount of stuff to cover, and then as people jump in, they can join us. I don't think anybody here was, maybe even with KW at this point, when I last did a buyer consult presentation. This was prior to launch starting, and I thought it would be good to go back to this because it's one of your top 5, and I think is anybody having a hard time kind of figuring out where to start with this buyer consult? Or has anybody kind of started working on it and they're like, well, I don't know if it's all here. Is there anybody who feels like they've got it down? No. Okay. All right, cool. I just want to kind of know my audience. So the things I want to touch on are, you know, kind of why and like the thought process behind having a buyer consultation. And then, you know, the important pieces of that consultation, and then to give you something to work off of. So I'm not going to give you an exact outline, but I'm going to give you the main points so that you can pick what makes the most sense for you, how you operate, and to give you a little flexibility, because I will tell you that though I have a packet and an outline and an interview page I make notes on, it really depends on the buyer. And if they are more of, you know, one type of personality or another, I'm going to adjust what I focus on, how much time I spend on certain things, what I touch on and how I talk about them is going to change based on how they respond and their personality type. And that generally is the best way to have a consultation, because, you know, you really just want to be hitting some main goals and some important points. And then there may be other details you're going to touch on later. So like during showings and stuff like that. So to start out, is there anybody who has had a buyer consultation and kind of followed some kind of outline or has some insight based on having done that so far? Could be good or bad. This is a safe zone.
This buyer consult, it's for doing the buyer agency. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, so it's to touch on buyer agency, but also just to have that initial sit down to discuss with the buyer what they're looking for, what you have to offer, and kind of what to expect. It's a really ideal, in an ideal world, that's the best thing to do first before you even go on showings, or at least after your very first showing. It will set the tone, and I promise you it'll make everything easier. Anybody else has had one that
Well, I've had
has
one,
a little insight?
but I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
But we all know that my situation was like super weird. Like I literally was just like, you're going to sign a buyer agency and then I'm going to work for you. And she was like, okay. And
Yeah.
and I know that that's not how it's supposed to go. So, I mean, I'm very in tune with this because I want to know, because I know that that will probably never happen again.
Yeah.
So
well, and there are rare, there's rare occasions where you meet somebody and they're like, I just want to write an offer. How do, you know, what do I need to do? You've got to figure out if you're a buyer's agent or not when you're writing that offer, and they have to sign their buyer agency. However, if they don't have a specific house in mind and they're not like, let's do this now, and even so, it's so valuable to take the time to get, if nothing else, get to know them a little better, because it's going to make the rest of the transaction so much easier. You'll know who you're working with. So, you know, the first thing, I'll start out by saying this. So why do we even have a buyer consultation? Why is that important? It's not required. It's totally up to you if you do one or not. But I can tell you, when I first started, I talked to a lot of experienced agents and some very successful people. And the thing that was true amongst all of them was do a buyer consultation. Make sure you take the time to sit down with those people before you're running all over town with them, to make sure that you're on the same page, to really to qualify them as much as they're qualifying you. Are these people really serious? Can they afford this? Are their expectations realistic? Does what they want in a home exist in their price point? These are all the important things to figure out before you're out there running all over town with them, right? Because not only is it not ideal for you, but it's really frustrating for them. Imagine being in their shoes where they're like, well, I got an agent, so we're just looking at houses. And you're just like hit and miss all over the place. Their offers aren't getting accepted. There's tons of competition. They're completely blindsided by what the market's doing. And it's upsetting. And then you're not serving them. So it's twofold. It's to benefit you and to benefit them. So it's very worth doing. You know, the most important things are to help set expectations. So you're setting their expectations of the market, what an agent does for them, what you will be doing for them, how you operate, how they like to communicate, how you like to communicate. This is the time to talk about, you know, I am best reached during these hours. This is when I'm typically not available. I usually respond within so much time. Setting those expectations, then if they reach out to you and they're like, I emailed you 5 times and I haven't heard back. Well, I tell people in my buyer consultation, I check my email at specific times of the day. I'm not constantly monitoring it. So if you need to reach me, text or call me and I will get back to you. I have learned that if I set the expectations that I'm off on Sundays, but I have someone available, my assistant is working and I have somebody available for showings, that they know they can still count on me to be there for them in so many ways. But if they think they're going to get me out there for 5 showings last minute on Sunday morning, that's not ideal. And it's going to mess up my outside of work life. So it's setting those expectations for them of this is how I operate. This is when, you know, what you can expect from me. This is what I'm legally obligated to if we're working together in buyer agency or not. Here's the benefits of buyer agency relationship, but also to understand how they operate. Are they a numbers person and you know they're very black and white? Then you know you can approach them in a different way. Here's some facts about how this goes. Here's some facts about the market. You know that when you send them a house, you're probably going to have to send them, you know, the tax costs, and if it's a condo, the condo dues and what they cover. You're going to have an idea of what they need instead of making yourself crazy trying to give them everything every personality type cares about. You can give them what's specific to them. And as you probably know, when it's 2 people, they're going to be different. They're almost always different. There's usually one who's like hyper vigilant and taking notes and, you know, all of that. And then there's one who's more laid back. That's very common. So, you know, get to know them and how they operate. And through these conversations, that comes up. Something that I'll come back to that. The other thing is, this is to figure out what they want and need. So you can straight up say, like, you know, what are your expectations of me? Or, you know, is this your first time purchasing a home? Have you gone through this with a friend or family member recently? You know, has it been a while since you've purchased a home? Or, you know, are they new to town? These sorts of bits of information will help you figure out what they want and need to know so that you know what to address. And that can be woven into conversation. If you have kind of a basic outline that you start with. The key thing, and this is something I have a hard time with sometimes, I don't know if Elizabeth is on this call, but she was on a buyer consult with me the other day and I just wouldn't shut up. The key is, she's laughing, the key is they should be talking at least half the time. And it's very challenging to do that if you don't have a plan in place. And, you know, for me, I was responding to how the buyers seemed concerned. And this was also one where we were talking about selling and buying, and I haven't perfected that yet. So, but the key is they should really be talking about half the time. If you're talking more than half the time, you will lose them. They will stop listening, things blend together. You know, if you feel yourself talking too much, stop, take a breath, observe, and try to ask them a question to get them re-engaged. So ideally, the way you're setting this up is, you know, things like, for starters, let me just make sure I have your full and complete name spelled correctly. You do not want to be out on showings with these people for a month and a half, and then you write the offer and you don't know their last name or like how to pronounce it. That's ridiculous. So make sure you know that stuff. Get their email, get their phone number, how they prefer to communicate. It's a little different right now with work from home, but I usually will ask where they work, you know, location and who they work for. That can be a good, like, touch point to connect with them if you know the industry they're in, if you're a fan of that company, whatever it is. But also, you know, where they're coming from to get to a showing if they're going to showings after work. and that can help you plan. So if they're like, well, I'm done with work at 4, and you're like, cool, let's meet in Mequon at 4:15, and they're like, well, I work downtown, that's not going to work. Figure that stuff out ahead of time. I also like to ask, if they have a regular work schedule, or if there's a certain day of the week they have off. That helps you plan ahead for showings. And I tell them, like, the reason I'm asking this stuff is so we can coordinate showings more clearly. Also, how do you like to communicate? Email, phone, text. So just clarifying that. And oftentimes, if it's a couple, you'll probably only have one person's contact to start with. Make sure you get them both up front. Then you've got them both in zip forms or DocuSign. You can text both of them. You don't want to only be communicating with one person. It's really important you have both. Even if one doesn't engage, just make sure they're both in the loop. And also figuring out what you need to know about them. So not just their personalities and where they work, but also things like, what's their timeline? Do they want to close, what would be your ideal closing date? Okay, this is then an opportunity for you to say something about what's a typical timeline. So, okay, you wanted to close in September. Well, I have a bit of information to kind of help you picture how that's going to work. And you could have a visual of a calendar, or you can just talk. It's up to you and how you operate. But, usually from accepted offer to closing, we're looking at about 35 to 45, maybe 50 days. So if you're looking at September as your ideal moving date, we can kind of keep that in mind and work backwards. Now, what about the time frame from when we start looking to accepted offer? Well, that varies. Let me tell you a little bit about the market. It's highly competitive. The inventory is very low. It means that we will have to move fast if we see something you love pop up on the MLS, and you're going to have to be ready to write an offer that day. And there will be competition. It's just a fact of the market right now. Set their expectations. Know that you are in control of that portion of the conversation to say, don't worry, I'm highly qualified. I have the skills to help you win in this market. So it's not to freak them out, but to say, let's all be on the same page. We're all on the same team here, and this is what we're up against, but it's very doable. So if you have friends who've been on the market and they're writing offers and offers and offers, that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to figure out what's most important to you, what a home is worth to you maximum, and I'm here to be your guide and advocate and to make sure that we're really making it work in this market. But it's the fact of the market. So accepted offer to closing, we have that timeline. From the time we start looking to accepted offer, it's going to be about a month to 2 months, depending on how often we are going out into, onto showings. And if what we're looking for is realistic within the market and having a little bit broader idea of what they want, maybe in terms of location or negotiables or non-negotiables, the more flexible that is, especially if price is not flexible, the more likely we are to find something sooner. And I always mention, there's a chance that the first house we see will be your house, or will be a house that you want to write an offer on. And it's important that you're prepared to do that. So I'm setting them up, I'm setting the expectations, and I'm also here to tell them I'm providing them the information they need to make the best decisions for themselves. So I'm also setting the expectation that I am here for them, that we are a team and I'm their go-to. When you say these things, you can see them physically relax. Elizabeth, when you were on she's still here? Yes. When you were on the buyer consult with me the other day, did you kind of notice that like physical response to some of those things that I was touching on?
Definitely. The woman, like you said, after the consultation, she was definitely the processor and everything. She listens, didn't engage a ton, but as soon as she got excited about anything you pointed out or touched on, she would engage right away. And it was awesome seeing just the stress kind of melt away, even though we had masks on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's really a lot of reading people, and it can be challenging when you're not there in person. But I think we've all been kind of honing our video skills. So You know, talking to people through Zoom is what I've mostly been doing. The reason we were there in person is we were also doing a listing visit at the same time. So we had to see the property. But yeah, wearing masks and using hand sanitizer, sitting far away, all of that. But even with that, you can physically see or hear in someone's voice when they're stressed, when they're relieved, when they are challenging you, when they don't trust you. The ultimate goal for me when it comes to doing a buyer consultation, there's a few really big points. And I think it's important for you to establish your main goals as well. And they don't have to be exactly the same, but there's kind of a pool of goals that a buyer consultation should pull from. So for me, number one is to build the relationship. I want to build trust with my buyers. And it's not just that they trust me, but I also want to feel like I know them well enough from that conversation that I trust them, that I know that they are in this to make it happen. Or I may be finding out that they're not super motivated right now and they are, you know, more looking towards fall, but they wanted to get the information needed. Great. I'm not going to shut down and end the conversation. It just slightly changes how I approach the conversation. And you will be surprised. I cannot tell you how many times I've talked to people who say, we want to buy in the next year or so, or we're not really sure, we're not super in a hurry. And once we have that consultation, within 2 weeks, accepted offer. Once they have the information they need, once they're empowered to make those informed decisions, once they feel like they understand how this works and it's less scary, you will be blown away by how much faster they move. And it's a great testament to why it's worth taking the time to do this. You know, ideally this conversation is like 45 minutes to an hour, depends on the person. It might go as long as an hour and 15. I try not to make it any longer than that, because even if I have a chatty person, if there's a partner, usually the partner is not chatty. So it's good to not totally suck up all their time and overwhelm them with info. So that's why it's good to have an outline. But really building that relationship and building that trust from the get-go is going to make your job so much easier. It's going to make the experience of searching and writing an offer and going through the purchase for your client so much easier, because they're not going to be questioning everything you're doing, and they're not going to misunderstand your actions or words because they didn't establish an understanding of you from the get-go. So it's just a great, efficient way to kind of get everybody on the same page with that. Does that make sense?
Amanda, can I ask a
Yeah.
quick question? So
Definitely.
if someone calls you, how much of this questioning do you do over the phone before you actually meet with them in person?
That's a great question, Heidi. So something I've been doing lately just to streamline where I am in the process with different people, because there's a lot going on right now. I have started doing a little more of a qualification call before the appointment. It's something that I always do with listings, but I've just recently started doing with buyers a little bit more. And there's a way to do it without saying like, I'm trying to figure out if we should meet or not, like if you're worth my time. But to say, you know, how can I best help you? And I had one just the other day, right before Elizabeth and I went to this appointment. I talked to somebody who was a referral from a past client. And what I figured out was I didn't want to sit down with them, so to speak, on Zoom and get them excited until we really knew where they stood financially. This is a huge piece of a purchase, right? You may think you know what your budget is, but if you don't have like the lender stamp of approval of a pre-approval on that, then you may be totally out of your realm. It might be related to someone who's self-employed or has a huge debt to income ratio. People might think they're fine, and then they find out they're not. And you don't want to be partway through the process when you find that out. So one of the things, Heidi, that I asked them was, you know, we talked a little bit about where they work, and you know, with things going on with COVID, it kind of lends itself to say like, how are you feeling about your job right now? Like lenders, you know, just to let you know, lenders are being very focused on confirming people's employment and looking at their income. So that's something that's likely to come up in the process. once you have an accepted offer. So to be proactive, it's good to kind of think about how that comes into play. So what I ended up doing was recommending, I gave them a list of lenders that I recommend. Something that I have in my buyer book, and I also send to people individually, is a list of 5 lenders that I think are great. And they're all different. There's like some credit unions, small local banks, a mortgage broker, people I've worked with, or, if you're new, other people have worked with who do a great job of communicating, explaining. You can build a relationship with them. So I have some people on there. I also have questions they're likely to ask you. And if you're not sure what that is, you could talk to a lender, or you could even look at their online applications. Most have them. And then I put in there like the documentation that they're likely to ask for. So things like a W-2. I just learned today, if you're self-employed, Fannie Mae is requiring a profit loss statement. And you also need a history of 2 years of employment, of self-employment with income. So things like that are important to note. What I found out was this guy is a 1099 employee. He's technically self-employed. He's a driver for Amazon. His partner is working in a restaurant, but is likely to be furloughed soon. So it's not a great scenario for them to be financeable at this point. So I said, you know what, before we get into a conversation, and we can absolutely have the conversation to talk about, down the line if need be, but I think your best first step is to talk to a lender. Now for you, if you don't have those relationships built with a lender yet, it can be a little risky to send somebody to a lender first. Reason being, any guesses? Anybody? Bueller?
They'll refer it to another realtor.
Exactly. They have they have referral partners in agents. We as agents are more valuable to lenders giving them referrals than they are to us in most cases. People come to agents first. So if they owe an agent a referral, they might send them to somebody else. So you have to be careful about how you approach that. I know in this situation that they're pretty solid based on the referral, but if you felt like they were going to walk if you didn't meet with them, then do what you can with your qualifying questions. Just have a conversation, kind of get a feel for how they're feeling about the process. Maybe ask them about their time frame. Ask if they've gotten a pre-approval. Hey, no worries if you haven't, just want to know where you stand in that process. That way you kind of know what you're walking into when you do have that appointment, and try to schedule it as soon as possible. If they're even making that next step, if the right house pops up and there's an open house tomorrow and you didn't have your consultation yet, you might lose them. And I've had that happen before. It's par for the course to some degree. You can't control that entirely. But if they're ready to go and you've got time, try to get them, to meet with you in the next day or two, ideally. It doesn't always work, but so Heidi, in answer to your question, it depends on the person, but I think the very basics, asking for their timeline, asking if they've gotten a pre-approval lined up yet, asking if they have any, like, what are they most concerned about, or what do they want to be sure we focus on? And then I just give them a preview. When we meet, here's how it's going to go. We'll talk about what you're looking for. I'll help you understand what's happening in the market, how we can best make things work in this market, typical time frames, any documents you'd need to sign, just generally set you up for success.
Do you send anything to them after the phone call, like before you meet?
Yeah.
Bring your packet with you when you meet.
So when I first have communication with that person, whether I've had a chance to talk to them on the phone or not, and it depends on the season, really. If I don't have a lot going on, I'm going to nail them down for an appointment right away. We'll figure it out then. But I'll try to get some information ahead of time. What I like to send them is a brainstorming page. And you can do this in a number of ways. You can send an email or a text and just say, tell me a little bit more about what you're looking for. Or you can get more elaborate. I like charts. So I send them a chart, and the chart is basically needs, wants, and wishes, and why. The why is the most important part. And I am always sure to point that out when I send it. Hey, here's a chart. You can make it into a Google Doc and fill it in. You can use it as a reference while you talk, you can look at it and write some notes down and text or email them to me. I don't care how they send it, and I don't want to make it complicated. And also the way they fill this out tells me a lot about how they operate. So needs, wants, wishes, and why. And then down the side, I have location, which is not just municipality, but it could also be, you know, rural versus urban, corner lot or not. Are there sidewalks? You know, some of that kind of stuff that kind of ties into location. You know, proximity to shops and restaurants, parks. Size, which is not just your number of bedrooms and bathrooms, but also square footage, yard size, garage size, 2 stories, 1 story, kind of all fits into there. And then condition and features, which I kind of tie together. And condition obviously is things like updates. So bathroom, kitchen being the more expensive things. You know, is the roof being new really important to them? Do they have a family member that just had to redo their basement? Is the foundations, you know, being solid a big important thing to them? Also features, fireplace, woodwork, built-ins, character, open concept, master suite, finished basement space, fenced in yard. These are some things that they can add, and then some things that are just either there or not. That kind of covers everything, in my opinion. So needs, wants, and wishes, location, size, condition, and features. And I also have a line on there for price. So I ask them to send me some kind of response in advance. Ideally, they have more than a day to do it. You will be shocked by how many people fill this thing out. It still blows me away. And I joke that like I was a teacher, and so I give people worksheets, this is their homework, but it is always surprising to me how many people actually fill it out. And if they don't send it in advance, they often like bring it with them. Like, I filled out my homework, and they want to share it. So it's great. They're excited. It gives them a chance as partners, if there's 2 people, to get on the same page or realize they are not on the same page. That's going to save you a lot of time and frustration, and them. And also it gives you some good insight into how detailed they are, how, you know, whether they're realistic about what they're looking for. They might not know. If they're not following along online, or they're looking on Zillow and their price point is $175, and they're looking at houses that are listed for $175, they're probably selling for $200. So what they're looking for doesn't exist in $175. So that that lends itself to that conversation. But ultimately, I can go back to this when we meet. Tell me more about what you're looking for. And then I have this for reference, and I can refer back to it, and so can they. I let them know this is not set in stone. This can change and will change as we go on showings. It's so much a process of elimination. So you're going to find that some of this stuff will change. And that's okay. We'll come back to it. If you're ever in a situation, has anybody been in a situation where you're like totally exasperated with somebody, and you're like, we have to have a come to Jesus talk? Like, what is going on? They're just totally spinning out of control with what they're looking for. They send you something that's like in frickin' Ozaki County, and you thought they were looking in Cudahy. You're like, what is happening? This is what you go back to. So if you have this for reference, you can say, you know what, let's go back to this. So this is what you were looking for when we first met. Let's talk about how this has changed and why. What are our top 3 priorities here? Let's prioritize some of this. So it's something you'll go back to, and it's something to set the expectation that you will go back to it, and it can change. And those showings are all worthwhile because they're going to help clarify what we're really looking for. That way, if they send you something crazy and you're like, this makes no sense. And so you're like, you get off the phone, and you're like, what the heck? This makes no sense. They're like sending me something. It doesn't match what they're looking for. I totally don't understand. What is even happening? You can just, instead of like doing that yourself, you can just go to them and say, okay, based on what you're looking for in this chart that we talked about, here's some things to note. This place does not have air conditioning. There's 0 backyard, and there's no basement. Do you still want to see it? Because this seems like it's against what you're looking for. And they may be like, oh my God, I got so distracted by the cute pictures, I didn't even notice there's no basement. You know what? I don't know if I do. Or, yeah, let's take a look at it anyway. But you're doing them the favor of not wasting their time. You're the one who's being detailed and looking at the boring stuff and not just the pictures. And you can go back to that. So it's definitely worth sending something in advance. And like I said, just seeing whether they fill it out or not and how they do can tell you a lot about how they operate. And that's really great. It's really informative. You can kind of adjust how you respond to them and what you share and what you expect of them based on how that goes. So they give you clues along the way. Why not get a good amount of info at the start so that you're not like playing this mystery game while you're doing showings and then you're like, I don't quite know how to read this person. It just makes everything easier. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it's all about relationships, right? It's all about understanding people, and being that this is an emotional decision, the more info you have up front, the better. So what you need to know about them that kind of ties into that, doing something in advance ties into that. You know, what I highly recommend is determining your main goals as you're putting together your outline. What I found to work best for me was I worked from, what are my main goals? What is this really about? Why am I doing this? Because ultimately, if I have to veer off course, at the end of that conversation, if I've hit those goals, it was a good conversation. So, you know, setting expectations, building a relationship and trust. What are some main things you want to make sure they understand? You got to touch on buyer agency. Ideally, you send that either right before your meeting, you slide a paper to them and that they sign, or you send it immediately following because they're excited. But it's good to talk about that. It's a contract, and you're setting their expectations of how you talk about contracts. And if you just don't talk about it, or you blow, you know, just like, here's 2 things about it and that's it. What I have is like a Cliff's Notes version of buyer agency. It's just a 1-pager. And it's like, what are the advantages of buyer agency? The first thing you should say is what it costs them, because that's all they're thinking about, right? If you've talked to anybody, financial advisor, or you know, anybody about anything where they're going to provide a service, all you want to know is what is it going to cost. So just say it first. For me, I don't charge an additional fee. I just get paid off of commission. It's paid by the seller. That's a great benefit. If we work with a for sale by owner, we may have to negotiate that. But upfront, they know, oh, okay, that's not a cost I have to worry about. Now, some people do have an additional fee, $295, $595, $895. Great, you can do that too. I don't charge that, and I say that. You might hear that other agents do charge a fee. I don't, so I want to tell you up front, this is what it's going to look like, because they may be talking to their friends or something like that. But what I do ask is that instead of charging you a fee because you have enough to pay for, especially if you're a first-time buyer, I just ask that you share my name with your family and friends. So I established that little bit of like, referrals are great, somewhere in that conversation. And then I just give them a little bit about what the advantages are of having a buyer's agent, the importance of having that signed before we go on showings, because technically, if you're in a showing and you're pointing out reasons not to buy, you're giving them advice, you better have buyer agency. So make sure you do. There are secret shoppers out there, be warned.
So Amanda,
yeah.
do you don't really sit with the agreement and like go line by line through it with them?
Depends on the person.
Okay.
Yep. If I've got somebody who like sent me the full chart of their needs, wants, and wishes with every freaking detail, if they brought their planner to the meeting and they're taking notes, if they read the packet and whatever it is to tell me these people need every little detail explained, then I'm going to take more time through that contract. Otherwise, I usually use the chart, and then I touch on a few things in the contract that are confusing, like multiple agency or multiple representation. And then, I tell them, if you have further questions, let's talk more about it. When I say I'm sending over the buyer agency agreement, I tell them, this is your opportunity to review it. Let me know if you want to change anything. I'm just going to fill it out based on our conversation. And then if there's anything to change, we can do that, and then I'll send it to you to sign. I do also stress that that agreement is flexible, so that if they want to end it sooner, extend it, if they're not liking how things are going, they have a change in their life, something happens where I don't want them to be afraid to come to me for things. And so one of my big things up front is to make sure that they understand how I approach this, which is, it is not about me. It is all about you. I am here as a guide, a reference, your expert in your corner. We're a team, but ultimately it's about you. So if your life changes, I don't want you to be afraid to come to me and say, can we just, cancel this contract for now? Or here's what's going on. That helps to build that trust in the relationship. And ultimately, if you have, I hate this term, but if you have commission breath and they can tell all you care about is closing that deal, you're going to lose them. Or you're going to have a really not great experience working with them, and they're not going to refer you because they're going to feel like it's about the money and not about them. And especially now, consumers are all about who they're working with, how much they care, the relationship they've built. This is not about it being a black and white transaction unless they're that kind of person. They're an investor, they're, black and white, just get it done. That's a different thing. But for the most part, you want to build that trust. And so just making sure they understand how that works. You're not locked in, you're not stuck. This is for your benefit. And, however it costs you, whatever, make sure they understand that part. That's the gist of it. The other things that I think are important to touch on in there is to make sure you're answering their questions. And you could, Heidi, in advance, you could even ask them, send me your top 3 questions, or what's your biggest concern? What I like to do when I'm talking to them is once I start to build that rapport a little bit, get their contact info, where they work, when it's best to reach them, tell them a little bit about when it's best to reach me and how I operate. Then I ask, are you a first-time home buyer? If I don't know yet, or has it been a while since you purchased a home? Do you know anybody who has bought a home recently? Have you kind of followed along with them? That gives you some background on what they may or may not know or misconceptions they may have. Do they have an ideal moving date? Okay, let's talk about time frame. Work backwards from there. Here's what to expect. Blend in a little bit of how I operate and that what to expect from the market. Do they have a pre-approval? Talk about the advantages of a pre-approval. I have some great lenders for you. This is why you need a pre-approval to write an offer. I would hate for us to go into a house you love and then find out you don't qualify for it. So let's do that in advance. And then we talk a little bit about price and what's happening. People are writing 10, 15, 20,000 over asking. That means that the prices we're looking at are below market value. The consumer has pushed up the value. The consumer or the buyers expect to write over asking. That means sellers can't price their house at market value. They have to price it below, so someone looking at it sees the value at 10 to 15, 20,000 over. So the prices we're seeing are not the market value. It's also good to establish those expectations. Hey guys, this isn't like everybody's writing 20,000 more than it's worth. It's just how the market is responding. The true value is what people are offering, and appraisal is there to protect you. So I'm kind of filtering in little bits about the benefits of an offer, what I can do for them, what to expect from the market. And then I ask them questions again. What's your biggest concern? What are you most worried about? Some people, it's that it'll, take too long, that I'll have to write a bunch of offers and be heartbroken. Let's address that. That they're going to end up with a house that's a lemon. Lots of people are worried about, the roof, the foundation. Cool. Let's talk a little bit about inspections and how that's built in to protect you. So you can address those things kind of within the conversation. Talking about what they're looking for, that's a great time to set expectations about whether what they're seeking matches up with the market. So that's why it's good to ask in advance, especially if you're new, you don't know exactly what's going on in that market. If you know ahead of time, you can do an MLS search and you can say, you're looking for a house with tons of character, that has sidewalks, that's, walkable to a bar or restaurant, and you don't care about having a big yard, but you really want to be in Mequon. This does not match up. So let's talk about that. So being the expert, kind of establishing that as well, and also serving their best interest on what they're looking for, super important. Do you kind of see how this can save you time and frustration? You're taking care of a whole bunch of that stuff in a 45 to 60-minute meeting so that it's not a frustrating experience for you and it's not a frustrating experience for them. It establishes the relationship. It puts you on the same page. And you're both going to be headed in the same direction walking out of this meeting. You're on the same team, you have a plan in place, you know what to expect from the market, so that you don't get into a house that they love and say, so you're gonna have to write 15,000 over asking. And they're like, what the hell? Like, where did this come from? Then they're angry, confused, upset, disappointed, and also questioning you. It totally throws everything off. So get that stuff going at the front end. It's super worth your time, especially if it's a Zoom call. Like, come on, you could have pajama pants on and be sitting at home. Like, this isn't hard. And it's just a good way also to see if they're willing to put the time into your relationship as well, right? So like, I'm happy to do anything for anyone all the time, and sometimes it burns me. And so having these kind of conversations in advance, sending out a little homework, asking people to look at something, asking for a response, asking them to meet with me at a particular time, ready to discuss something, and asking for their full focus. They have to give a little to get my expertise. And so having that set up also is a way for me to see how invested they are. You know, if only one of the partners shows up and they're like, well, so-and-so had a thing, so cool. Well, that's how every showing is going to go. And then when we have to write an offer, are we chasing them down? Do they even care? Do they not even want to buy a place right now? You know, this tells you a lot. So it's fair to expect them to give a little. And it feels nerve-wracking, right? Like, you want the business and you want to make it super appealing, and you just want to do it, and you don't want to ask too much, and you don't want to seem annoying. But at the end of the day, you are an expert. They're coming to you for your guidance and expertise. You are, in theory, not even charging them anything. Or if you are, it's minimal. So yeah, they should put in a little. They should give a little, because you're going to have to ask them to give more as you go. So it's a good chance to kind of test how invested they are too.
So what do you, on the contract again, what do you put in for the term of the agreement? If they want a house in, say, 60 days, do you put 60 days, or are you thinking, well, we should put 6 months because it might not happen in 60 days?
It's a combination of things. So in part, it's largely it's if they have a lease, when does that lease end? So if it's coming up so soon, then I'm like, we might be having to do a month-to-month extension. I try to do a minimum of 3 months. And I'll ask them, especially if they're very detailed, you know, do you have a preference of how long we set this for? If they're like, well, sometime by the end of the year, then I put December 31st. And if I'm like, these people are going to drive me nuts, and if I can't get them under contract in the next 3 months, I'm done with them, then I put 3 months. You can always extend it as long as you're within the contract. Once it expires, you have to write a new one. So, and you can be, you know, for some of them, they're like, I don't know. I mean, you want to have that contract still going through the closing date. So keep that in mind too. It's not just to accepted offer. Okay, so the other thing you want to be sure you're providing is information and resources. So like I said, the way I do it, I kind of blend that into that first conversation, but then I go to my buyer book, and I have something printed out. I've been sending this as PDFs to people, and I'm totally revamping it. So there's a lot of this is going to change, but I get this out, or I ask them to pull it up on their computer if we're meeting remotely, and I only touch on a few pages in there. The rest of it is for reference for later. The stuff I don't touch on are the step-by-step from accepted offer to closing. That is way too much info. They are already overwhelmed. Don't talk about that. Just have it in there, or touch on it lightly depending on how much they want to know. The thing I think is another good thing to establish is something to look forward to. So what I usually say with that is, we're going to talk more about how that works as we go out on showings. So it leaves them wanting a little more. If they're interviewing multiple agents, you're not giving it all up on the get-go. Also something good to ask them when you talk to them on the phone initially or text. Hey, are you interviewing other agents? So here's what I have in the book. I'm just going to kind of show you on the screen. And I've said this before, I think it's so important to make something your own and true to you. However you do this, it has to be genuine. So taking a packet that someone else uses and not changing a darn thing on there is probably not going to serve you very well. It needs to feel genuine. You need to understand what's in there. It tells your client a little bit about you, right? Like when I hand somebody like a color coordinated thing with worksheets and my logo on it, they know who they're dealing with, right? So make it true to you. So I have on here a page that I also use for open houses. This has my contact information. It has some references, which if you don't have past clients, you can have people be a character reference for you. You know, they can speak to how you operate, how organized you are, stuff like that. And then on the back, it has like first steps. So pre-approval and buyer consultation if you're a buyer, and determining your home goals. And it just has all my contact info. So I put that in the front of my packet because it has these some people's reviews, and also I use it for open houses. So it has double purpose. I put a table of contents in here because I'm a nerd, but it's handy. And what is in here is the buyer agency is the first thing. So I have a page where I explain what it is, and then I have the actual packet, the actual contract. I have home loans and pre-approvals, that page I mentioned where I have, you know, some preferred lenders or some great lenders. You know, I make sure to note in there they have the option to work with whoever they'd like, but these are some people who've done a great job for people in the past and are great to work with. So I've got like 5 lenders, you know, name, email, who they're with, and then questions they're likely to be asked just to help them prepare for that, as well as some documents they should have prepared and questions they should ask their lender. So you're already establishing I'm your advocate. I'm providing some helpful info for you. But I also remind them that the lender is the financing expert. So if they have questions about a loan, don't feel like you have to know everything. Send them to the expert. The next thing I have in there is how the search works. So I just have a little page that says, like, because people are going to ask you, like, what do we do now? How does this go? Should I just go to an open house and call you? Like, what do I do? So I have step 1, shop online. So I can talk about my app. I can talk about the MLS, how it's more accurate than Zillow, Realtor, etc. when it comes to accepted offers. So establishing that I have a link to MLS that I can send them so that they can get the most updated information. That I use the hot sheet every day, that I'm looking out for them, but that they should send me anything of interest as well. And that I will provide more details. So we can see stuff that people in the public can't, right? Like that's an agent view benefit of MLS. So if they are interested in a place, what I tell people, because this is how I operate, text me the address. You don't even have to say hi. You can if you want. Text me the address. I'll get on the MLS app, get you more details, find out about any problems, anything in private remarks, condition report, showing restrictions, when they're reviewing offers. I'll reply to your text, and then we can set up a showing if you'd like or get more information. So come to me, come to me, come to me. I'm your expert. I'm your person. Whether you find it somewhere else, whether there's an open house, whether your friend sends you something on Facebook, come to me, come to me, come to me. I have more information that you need. Cool. I'm your expert. I'm your go-to. Scheduling showings, how does that work? You know, what I tell people in this market is that we will, if something great pops up, we need to go right away and we need to be ready, and that I'm ready and I've got some people for backup if need be, and we'll go as soon as we can in the event that something great pops up. However, it is very beneficial to go out and see more than one house at a time, right? Are you finding this to be true? If you go out with people and they can compare side by side. Yeah. So, so I recommend that we set up a 2-hour block, or depending on the time frame of travel, you know, block of time on an evening, on a day, on a Saturday, that we will set aside, and then the day before we'll set up our tour. Reason being, if we set it up too far in advance, what happens? They get accepted offers, and then you have holes in your tour and you're calling people like a maniac. So set it up the day before. So I established that ahead of time. it's really beneficial to compare houses side by side. Why don't we set a time in the next week or two, depending on when they want to close, what their time frame is, so that we can get out there and compare some places side by side. It's very much a process of elimination. Even if they're not the perfect house, it will be informative. It can be worth going. You might be surprised by what you find. So those are the two ways we do showings. How long is a showing? 20 to 40 minutes for the most part. With COVID, we may be limited to a half hour, so it's important to be on time. It's important to have your mask. We're going to be asked to wear gloves and hand sanitizer and shoe covers, and kind of establishing that expectation. If you have to use the bathroom, do it before you go on showings. It is not real cool to be using somebody else's bathroom, especially right now, especially if someone's living in the house. So prepare. And if we have a bunch of showings, bring water, bring snacks. Nobody wants to buy a house hangry, especially me. I keep snacks in my car for that reason. So just handy tips, things to expect, help them understand what the heck we're supposed to be doing. You know, they only learn so much from house hunters and half of it's inaccurate. So you gotta be the expert. The other thing I put in here is a copy of the MLS sheet, the buyer view, and the agent view. I've also just pulled out the app on my phone. Elizabeth can attest to this. I did this the other day. I pull out my phone and show them what I can see. It just helps them understand what I'm doing. Some things I leave a bit of a mystery, but that I'm upfront about. I also talk about that location, size, condition again. I set the expectation that if the price cannot change, we may find the perfect location, but the size isn't quite what we were hoping for. Or it's in beautiful remodeled shape and it's a good size, but it's not quite where we were looking. So helping them understand that there's going to be a give and take. If the home is 85% or better of what you're looking for, it's worth writing an offer. Nobody finds a perfect house. I'm a great example of that. I have no balcony and I park outside, and I refused to compromise on either of those things until I saw this condo. So they have to understand that's going to happen even for real estate agents. So setting that expectation is important. And when we go through houses, I like to refer back to that. Hey, this house is awesome. It's a perfect example of a trade-off of location for size. Wouldn't you agree? To kind of get them on the same page with you. We're all in this together. We're all looking at this the same way. I put another copy of that chart in there, the needs, wants, wishes, or the brainstorming page, because it's going to change and we'll come back to it. The other thing I put in there that I tell them is pivotal, and it's up to you how you want to do this, but I think it's important, is I actually give them a guide to offers. It's one page. It has all the important parts of an offer in it and kind of what's typical. And it's something they can look at ahead of time and ask me questions about and discuss amongst themselves, so that when we write an offer, they're ready. They understand what's in an offer. I stress this. If I don't get a chance to touch this packet, I tell them at the very least, look at the offer quick reference, make sure you understand what's in there. We'll talk more about it. Because if you wait until we're writing an offer, we are under a tight time frame. It is exciting and nerve-wracking. I'm reading through the entire thing, which is going to take 2 hours if we go through every detail. It's really important they understand this before you write an offer. And for you, I'm not going to give you this because this is part of your offer writing of your top 5. You should be able to put this together as an informed agent who understands the offer. So it's my challenge to you, and it should be part of your offer review, that you put together this page. I like to use it also as a cover page on my offers. I cannot tell you how few people do that. But when you send in an offer with a cover page on it that has all the details in one handy spot, you look like a rock star to that agent. And it also helps you double check your work. It also helps you clearly communicate to your client what's in their offer. It's very worth taking the time to do this. So that's a big piece of the packet. So again, offer quick reference, all the important details, what's typical and common for each of those. Make that while you're reviewing the offer to purchase. Put that together based on asking other agents, understanding what to expect from the market. This is a big educational opportunity for you to put this together. So I'm not giving you my copy because it's not going to help you at all if I just give it to you. Cool? Very worthwhile having something like that in there. Then I have home buying step-by-step, accepted offer to closing. You can make it a game board, a map, a list, a chart, bullet points. I just put it in there. It's just for them to look at later. I don't talk about it in the meeting. They're overwhelmed by this point. I have a checklist in there that we send once they have an accepted offer, so they can kind of see how we operate, that we're coordinated and organized. And then I have inspectors in the back. It's just a little bit about what to expect from an inspection, some inspectors that are recommended, something to reference back to. So if we schedule the inspection and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't have time to talk through this whole thing with them, I'll say at least go back to your packet and look at the inspections page. That'll give you a good idea of what to expect. This, again, is an opportunity for you to put together something so that you understand what an inspection is. What is, what to expect from the inspection, the inspector, how the contingency works. Putting this together is going to make you a better buyer's agent. Agreed? Overwhelmed?
Are you giving them a lot of information just before you get it signed?
Before I get what signed?
The buyer agency signed?
What do you mean?
What's the risk that they could walk off and go, oh, I just picked up a ton of information. I don't need anything more?
I mean, for me, I don't see it as too much of a risk because it's not costing them anything to work with me. So if they're going to work with somebody else, it probably means that they're not somebody I would want to work with. And it burns. I mean, I've had people before who are like, hey, so we like, my sister had somebody and we were out of town and we went to this place and we didn't bring you and we hadn't signed by our agency yet. So we haven't accepted offer now. And I'm like, cool. You probably weren't going to listen to me anyway. So you have to have a certain level of acceptance of like, not everybody is your person, and hanging on to the missed ones is going to kill you. So don't do it. But yeah, you can have them sign right while you're sitting there with them, or you can send it in advance and say, if you're comfortable, you can sign this now, or we're going to talk about it when we meet, or you can send it right after. It's up to you. The mistake that I make if I'm not on top of my game is I have the meeting, I tell them I'm going to send it to them, and then I send it like 3 days later. I'm like, that looks terrible. Like, I don't have my stuff together that I waited that long. Get them while they're enthusiastic. And it's to their benefit, and then you know how you can behave as well.
And then a couple minutes ago, you showed a chart and then you put it back, but I didn't see which chart you were talking about. I think
that's the one that I mentioned earlier. So needs, wants, wishes.
Oh, that one. Okay.
Location, size, condition.
Yep.
And again, this is how I do it. This is not how you have to do it. You can have leading questions. You can, just ask them to describe what they're looking for. You can make it a conversation. It's totally up to you how you want to do that.
Cool.
Cool. Anybody else have questions? Did this at least give you a good amount of notes to work off of when you're putting this together? Do you feel like you have a little more direction with this now? Yeah, I see Tracy giving me a thumbs up. Cool. Is there anything you feel like I missed or you want clear and more defined? No? Okay.
I have a question. Shocking.
Yeah.
So I have a showing tonight scheduled with a new client, and I already know there's like a small amount of stuff that I have to add and throw into whatever and send out to them. But we have a block of time for an hour, and it's tenant occupied, and the tenants are going to be the ones that let us in, which already sounds frustrating. I already have a call into the listing agent, all that stuff, but I don't expect to spend an entire hour, and we haven't gone over agency and I know they're not pre-approved, but that's neither here nor there. One showing is all they're gonna get. But where do I go with them to have this conversation once I have the captive audience? Because nothing's really open. I mean, I have a hotspot on my phone and I love to use my computer. I don't like to go with paper all the time. I feel like there's more options and flexibility, and I'd rather type. But should I look for a location that's close to there, like maybe a park that we can
potentially? Yeah, I mean, you could, and I have done this before, where you have a showing and then follow it up with a conversation. Just make sure they know to expect that. You could also, depending on the time frame you have to work with, you can ask some of these questions. You can get some of this information just through conversation as you're walking through the house. You know, a lot of times those like stand around and chat things happen in basements. I recommend getting them outside if you're not all melting. But you know, they'll look to you to set the pace, or they should. And so at some point in that interaction, I would probably do it at, you know, ask questions as we go. And then, especially if I can tell they're not digging the house, then it's just our chance to talk. If they're really into the house, we'll focus on that. But I'll set, you know, I'll kind of plan in my mind after we walk through. And I may even say, we're going to walk through and then let's chat for a few minutes in this like shaded spot over here after. So they kind of know. And then I can ask them a few questions and do kind of a truncated version of a consult. And based on the information I get from that, I may say, great, let's set a time to follow up with some more of these details. I want to be respectful of your time. You know, let's do a Zoom, or let's plan to meet later. But I would ask them in advance, like, do you guys have, you know, a half hour or so after the showing? We could, there's some really important information I want to make sure you have. And this will kind of, you know, help us get on the same page and talk about the place we just saw, and see if they're open to that. The way they respond to your requests like that is going to tell you a lot about how they will be to work with.
Okay.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I would say, even though you guys are newer and you want to work with everybody, a mistake that I continue to make, honestly, and should have been paying attention to from early on, is know that you are a person that they should want to work with, right? So do the work and make yourself informed and desirable to work with, to be the expert, and then also expect that they'll treat you that way. So if you're qualifying people and you're like, red flags are going off, then you don't have to work with them. And just understand that you are the owner of your business. You are the CEO. You decide who you work with or not. If your safety is a concern at any point, do not compromise. It is not worth a check. You know, make sure that you're paying attention to those things on your radar, and that you're taking this opportunity to not just show them why they should work with you, but also to make sure you're figuring out that this is going to be a good fit for everybody. It's really worth doing that. It seems a little like snobby, or like, oh, but I'm new, I want to take whatever business I can. But, you know, not every bit of business is worthwhile or good. So, you know, just take this opportunity to also figure out how this might go. And if nothing else, you can help set your expectations of like, well, these people are going to be a real piece of work to work with, but I need the business. I think we connect pretty well. I don't feel unsafe with them. They're a referral from whoever, whatever it is. But at least then you know what you're walking into. And then you're not allowed to complain about it. If you're like, I knew what I was walking into, this is how it's going, you know, how can we best serve these people? Then you decide you're moving forward as well. So it's not just them. Cool. We're only a little over time today. If no one has any other questions, I challenge you to make this one of your things to do this week, is to sit down, take your notes while it's fresh in your mind, and make an outline or figure out what documents you need to work on. Go through, you know, schedule an appointment through the helpline with Andy or Steph, and go through an offer to purchase before you're writing a real offer to purchase and only have an hour. Give yourself a time to set an appointment with them, go through the offer. And as you're doing that, make notes so you can start to put together that cover page or that offer guide if you want to do that for your clients. You know, these things all blend together and work together to make you a well-rounded, informed agent. It's why we have a top 5. So this is a good thing to dive into, or to revise if you've already put something together. So I challenge you to make that part of what you do this week. Next week, even though we don't have team meeting, we do have launch, and it's going to be more of an open forum. So I encourage you to come back and tell me how putting this together went. Bring your questions. It's going to be an opportunity to have more of a conversation. You know, right after a holiday, a little more casual too, but I will expect to hear from some of you that you've worked on this, and I'd love to hear how it went. The more feedback I have, the better I can serve you. So, sound good? Awesome. Thank you everybody for coming, for participating. I love seeing your faces, and I look forward to seeing your buyer consultations come together. It's going to serve you, and it's going to serve your clients. It's going to make you an agent they love to work with and refer. So best of luck. I'm here if you need help. Don't forget the helpline, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you. Have a good weekend, guys.
Yep.